know about you guys, but to me, there's nothing quite like a nice 4-month break between contracts to really let you shake things out and get your house in order. We are back, and not just back, but back in a fight. We'll talk about that in a moment, but first, I want to brag a little bit. Over the course of the last several months, through some shrewd refits and putting a lot of work into selling off the rest of the vehicles we had and just kind of carefully measuring out the money that we had versus the money that we were going to receive potentially from contracts. We landed on a pretty juicy one. Uh, One that has already paid out a fair amount, and we just barely got here. But what this has allowed us to do is to help our somewhat ailing roster. I'd like to show off a bit. X Company now consists of 4 lances. This is the maximum that Captain Kobe can support with his current uh, strategy rating. So we'll look on increasing that, although probably more important to increase his leadership first so that we can field any new people to fill these roles because our roster is actually pretty close to full. Let me show you what I mean. In Central, we have Captain Kobe El Garouge and his brand new Stalker 3F Yagawen. We got lucky. One of these suckers showed up on the mech market at a nice price, and we managed to snap it up. We refitted it a little to this new Yagawen type. It's very similar to the one that he had before, except that it strips out the LRM-10 and its associated ammo, and if I remember correctly, that LRM-10 ammo bin is what actually lost us his mech. I might be wrong, but it strips out the LRM-10 and its associated bin in favor of slapping just more SRM-6s on it. This thing is a beast at close range, and still has a nice long-range punch with 2 large lasers. Captain Kobe is accurate as ever. I expect that he'll be able to get some serious work done with this. The heat sink ratios are all the same. The various range bands he operates in, he's missing one LRM-10 range band, but I think that he can more than make up for that. I'm looking forward to seeing what this mech can do. Pugs is still in her Marauder, but we've refitted it to a Marauder Mad 3D, stripping out that AC5 and plugging in a large laser. It now lacks any critical weak points that the other one had. In fact, even gains a little armor out of the deal, and this makes it capable of taking a bit more punishment and resisting criticals because there's no sensitive explosive part to catch fire and burn. Looking forward to seeing what this mech can do, especially because it has a couple additional heat sinks that'll allow it to keep firing those PPCs every turn. Although if we move and fire, we're gonna gain heat anyway. Sergeant Barati Ruma, we managed to get her right out of that dervish that she was in, and slap her into the Tallman that we were refitting. Since we managed to find a stalker for Captain Kobe, I decided to go ahead and put her in the Thunderbolt since she actually has a preference for laser weapons. She has a -1 to her accuracy, this is a good thing, remember, on all laser weapons, and as such, this huge laser boat, with her already pretty excellent Gunnery 3, means that she should be nailing shots just as well as Captain Kobe, at least in conventional circumstances. With large lasers, forget about it. Captain Kobe has such a preference for large lasers that he is effectively at a 0+ with them. He's so cool. So cool. Oh, husbando. The Tallman here is packed to the gills with heat sinks and medium lasers, which means that when it clambers up onto a target, it can just go bzzzt. Its armor is also pretty significant, and being a heavy mech, it's still pretty maneuverable for it. This is going to probably be one of the primary tanks of Central Lands. It's going to move up close, it's going to take shots, it's going to pummel back, kick, bite and scratch, and just laser the hell boiling away armor so that someone like, say, Captain Kobe with his pile of SRM-6s can just then crit search. Lastly, Corpora Isra Adam is bringing up her Wolverine. The Wolverine is pretty much in a perfect state. Didn't need to refit this one. And I still think that it's going to be a good part of this team. Even though it's the lightest mech on the team, it's still a pretty heavy medium, and it can bring those jump jets of its to the fight to give us a little extra maneuverability that we're lacking. So she's pretty much going to be the recon element of Central Lance. Altogether, this brings us up to a 280 on the nose tonnage lance, which makes it the top tippiest of heavy lances. Looking forward to seeing what this lance can do, and the astute of you might notice this gray coloring means that we do have something for it to do. Come into that later. Big Sky has expanded a bit. I have fully embraced the internal Lyran, and have populated Big Sky Lance with a bevy of mechs that all have movement 5 or greater to create a scout heavy lance. Manning this lance are pretty much the same people that we had before. Sassy with her Wolverine. Dizzy is still in his Hermes too. We're still looking for a good mech for Dizzy. I took a look at his specializations. He likes things that have guns on them. Autocannons and machine guns and whatnot. I'm less a fan of those kinds of mechs, but if we can find like a nice, let's say, perhaps my favorite mech ever, the Hunchback, to plop him into with that AC-20 rockin' enemy face, we can probably negotiate something out. But for right now, he's in the Hermes, and even though he likes cannons, I don't. I opted to instead refit the Hermes to a Hermes 3. It's not actually a Hermes 3. That's a completely different type of mech. Why they named it this is just confusing. Which trades out the AC-5 and the Flamer for and the medium laser for just straight up a pair of large lasers and an extra heat sink. This thing can fire one of these large lasers while moving at full speed each turn, completely heat neutral. If you decide to fire both of them, you're gonna see some overheating, but over the course of several turns, you can kind of bring it back down as long as you don't move too much. It's got that extra large laser just for redundancy and alpha striking purposes, so yeah, we'll see what it can do. Corporal Luke Kelly is still in his Trebuchet 5N. It's perfect as far as I'm concerned. I ain't changing it. Small is bringing her Shadowhawk, Corporal Umarana Koransi. I'm butchering that. Korasani, bringing PPC and LRM5 to the battlefield. You know, hopefully she took some of the time to dial it in. Corporal Katie Tripp rounds out our 280 tonnage with her 20-ton mech. Probably she's still going to have some problems with me wanting to field that mech because it's still a wasp. It's still a piece of garbage. But I'll try to be a little more brave with her. See if she can't find positions for her to go tangle with tanks or something. But it may still be kind of few and far between that I actually field her. I'm fielding her in the fight, just whether she's actually in the fight. Firebrand Lance has been mixed up a bit. We have, once again, Lieutenant Junior Grades Shayla Salami. Happy is in her Crusader. We refitted this Crusader slightly into a version that strips out those machine guns that were giving me some aneurysms and replaces them with a bit of extra armor and downgrades the LRM-15s it had to LRM-10s, but overall adds 6 heat sinks, which significantly helps with the mech's ability to just fire everything. When she only had 10 heat sinks, she could fire like maybe her LRM-15s every turn, and then she would overheat. It'd be ridiculous. With the 16 heat sinks, she can fire a fair number of her weapons. When in close range, she can go medium laser, SRM-6, SRM-6. That still just builds up 14, so she can run and fire all of that, be totally heat neutral. On a different turn where she's slightly further out, she can fire both LRM-10s and maybe take some long-range shots with her medium lasers, still totally heat neutral. It's a good situation to be in. I like mechs that run cool. They're just more convenient for me than anything where I have to really juggle the heat constantly. Twinkletoes is still bringing her Centurion. Another refit I did, swapped it out for one that replaces the AC-10 with a large laser and small laser. This, I don't know so much about this one. I kind of did it because I was doing everything else with large lasers and whatnot. It maxes out the armor on the Centurion and gives it several more heat sinks so that it can fire all of these weapons reliably. I mean, it can fire pretty much all of its forward-facing weapons. That's 9, 12, uh, 16, and be heat neutral if it stood still, and only gain like 2 heat if it ran. And that's pretty impressive. But I may miss the punch of that AC-10 over time. I don't know yet. We'll kind of see. One thing that this thing definitely can do is get into scrap a little bit better than its predecessor because of that heavier armor and the fact that all but the LRM-10 are excellent weapons for shooting in close range quarters. We'll see how that operates. Twitch is still in his urban mech. There's just not a lot I can do with that. Dagger, Pia Croce, our private, is still in her Wolverine. Now, Firebrand Lance, just like usual, is kind of built up of everything else left over. Fortunately, everything else left over this time added up to 200 tons, making it a medium lance. That said, I'm doing something a little different with Firebrand Lance this time. Contract only requires me to have two lances fielded, so since that's the case, I'm keeping Firebrand Lance as kind of a off-duty lance. The idea is that if I ever take any significant damage to, say, Central or Big Sky, and need to take one of them offline, Firebrand can step into the role for a week, maybe do a couple of missions, and then come off, because it just, like before, it has the same problem that there's just not any real power players in Firebrand. But hopefully, if we can knock the enemy out, reduce them to a low morale, we can then refield Firebrand Lance as a training lance, finally get some experience up on Private Pia Croce, and hopefully turn her into a force to be reckoned with a little bit of time. But this last one is the one I'm most proud of. Over the course of our time in recovery, I made a couple investments, you might remember, at the end of the last contract in our future. Those investments paid off with Avenger Lance. Avenger Lance is what I like to call a rapid reaction lance. It's kind of not a, it's kind of a thing that's sort of a house rule in Against the Bot. It's not in the official rules doc, but it's something that a lot of people do, where you take aero units, aerospace fighters, or mechs, or vehicles, or whatever, and you put it into a lance that consists only of 2 units. 2 unit lances are not given any sort of uh, Mech HQ for Against the Bot does not consider it a valid quote unquote lance for purposes of receiving missions, and as such, these guys will never see a mission. That's fine, we don't want them to. Effectively, what they are is a reinforcement wing. Something that we can say, okay, here's a really tough battle over here. You guys who are dedicated to reinforcing, you can go to one of these battles this week, and we can roll for you like normal to see if you can reinforce the battle. Just like a Scout Lance, they're designed to reinforce on a 5 plus, which does mean that occasionally, even though they're kind of the standby group, like the battle happens, but either in this circumstance, probably something like, we were in the middle of refueling, or the enemy actually has really heavy anti-air in the area, or, we tried to get to the location, but the enemy fielded a bunch of their planes and we couldn't get on target. General idea being that, they didn't just ignore it. They didn't, not show up because they couldn't, be asked to get in the plane. They didn't show up because of other circumstances. But if they make that 33% of the time roll, a 5 plus on a 6, on a d6, then they show up and they can contribute to the fight, reinforcing as normal. These guys in specific, you might have noticed off on the right side that I'm acquiring a lot of cluster bombs. My plan is to kind of keep these guys safe by turning them into a dedicated bomber wing. Any aerospace can do this. You can mount bombs under its wings in hardpoint mounts, and when it comes onto the battlefield, you'll be able to dump those bombs onto the enemy and then fly off the other end. Just leave havoc in your wake. I'm looking forward to seeing exactly how that pans out. I've not really used aerospace fighters significantly before. I know how they handle. Oh, I need to get this guy like a little bit of background. He was a late hire. He came in like pretty much on our way here. But another elite Good stuff. I guess I should talk about the new people that we got real quick. Nazima was with us earlier, um, but we managed to actually get her a pretty heavy aerospace fighter, the Chippewa CHP-W5. This is actually something that can really wreck a mech if it comes into straight fighting with it. It's got lots of armor on its front, not so much on its sides, which is kind of a downside. Aerospace fighters work a little differently when it comes to damage. They have just a single unit of structural integrity. Like, they don't have arms, legs, limbs, and so on. Instead, they have, like vehicles, very heavy armor, but unlike vehicles, they don't get crit unless they take a damage threshold. Effectively, when they take damage over a certain amount, that's what potentially procs a crit, rather than having the vehicle problem of having a hit chart that's just full of, on this chart, you have potentially a critical hit. That means as long as they're taking relatively light fire, they can take round after round after round, pretty easy. But if they get pinned down by something that has long range weaponry and is just really sighted in on them, say like a catapult that's got a bunch of LRMs, then they could be in some trouble, get knocked out of the sky, and that would be a loss of a really expensive thing, because when a Sparrow Space Fighter crashes, it crashes pretty damn hard. My plan is to keep them above and out of that range of danger, uh, generally. But maybe in a pinch, these LRM-15s and large lasers, we could swoop low enough to utilize those on an enemy and then hopefully swoop away. We'll see how things go. I'm still feeling out how exactly these things work. Uh, I do know like how to use them on Mech HQ and on Mega Mech, but I don't have as strong a feel for the tactics behind them, so I'm just going to kind of use them in a strategic fashion. Uh, Chief Petty Officer Hung Huang came in pretty late in the game, so late that we pretty much arrived on the planet a month after, but he brought with him his Hellcat HCT 2133S, a pretty heavy mech, or a pretty heavy aerospace fighter, so that was pretty excellent to get my hands on. Uh, Not much more to talk about with these guys. I guess there is the detail that right after we landed on uh, what was it? Galatea. Right after we landed on Galatea, Dynamite became pregnant. I have no idea who I'm from. It didn't tell me. So I just kind of made some assumptions. You know, it's the future. Everyone's cool about this. You know, do what you want. Anyway, let's talk about the contract we're currently on. We're on Corridan 4, a world owned by the Lyran Commonwealth. Our employer, the Draconis Combine. Remember what I was saying about if the Draconis Combine offer us a good contract, I'd gladly take it? This might be called Operation Bronze Medal, but as far as I'm concerned, this is Operation Catharsis. We're running an extraction raid, a hit and run, in which we are going to be stealing a lot of shit from the Lyrans and giving it to the Draconis, and then getting the fuck out. Our allies are veterans, rating F mechs, so they weren't sending the best. And our enemies just regulars. We've seen that before. That spawns some guys who are a little more, occasionally a bit more elite than just regulars. But you know, it's pretty dependable that they're roughly around the regular. Started a couple days ago. I've just advanced to the point where we're actually having a fight, and will end on March of next year. We're getting 4 million C-bills a month for this baby, and that's an excellent amount because, you know, a lot of that's going to go into maintenance and repair and whatnot, but a fair amount of that will also be able to go into buying heavier mechs off of the unit market. 4 million is a good price for lots of medium mechs, so we'll be able to hopefully finally get people like Twitch and Icicle out of their buckets and into something respectable. This was super important to me. We are operating independently. No allied oversight. The fact that our allies are veterans doesn't really matter in this case, but it does mean that we don't have to worry about any allied mechs crashing into the enemies. The Draconis are really hands off with mercenaries. They don't like them. They think they're dishonorable. They think that dealing with them is dishonorable. But apparently, in this one circumstance, whoever this is, like Draconis wise, figured, all right, in this circumstance, fine. But we're not going to get anywhere near you, you filthy otaku. Oh, wait, no. Gaijin? Something. We're filthy. That's the thing you need to know. And they're going to keep us at arm's length. Battle loss compensation. This is something that we didn't have with the Lyrans and didn't really think that we'd need it as much, but having some is better than having none. Essentially, the way this works is that our ally will give us a payout of 10% of the value of any equipment or mechs that we lose in the fight. We had a zero battle loss compensation with that last contract, and it fucking cost us, especially when Captain Kobe's mech bit the dust. With this, we'll at least recoup a little bit of the losses that we take. We've got a 60% salvage. That's a pretty standard salvage contract. It's the same one that we had last time, and I'm looking forward to abusing it. When we landed on the planet, the enemy morale was already low, and our contract score starts at 1. It's because by default there have been no fights. If there have been no fights, by default the contract score is 1. So the enemy is already kind of shaken by the landing of these forces. We know that Lyrans are a bunch of idiots. We know that their Draconis are pretty sharp, but they're keeping us at arm's length. They're not going to offer us any help, which is fine. We don't really need help. We've got a heavy set of mechs. We've got Firebrand Lance currently unassigned. That's what I was talking about with them not really being assigned to anything. Idea is that they can hop in for Big Sky or Central should the need arise. Big Sky is currently my Scout Lance. They've got a bunch of Movement 5 mechs that should be able to deploy at the start of any mission. Central Lance is my Fight Lance. They're out there and they're going to go get in some damn fights, and if I can get a lot more heavier stuff, I'd love to turn them into an Assault Lance. That would be... I didn't intend for that to sound like that, but boy, that's exactly how I feel. Um, and that's kind of the shape of it. We're not that far from where we've been, pretty much. You can already see Sabik over here and Galatea over here. So pretty much, we started over on the more south of this, went to Sabik, stopped off on Galatea. Like, not we weren't on Galatea, but a couple days before I had this contract show up, and that was pretty cool. I waited on it a bit just to give us a little extra R&R time, and then we took off. Took us about like a month or 2 months to get here. Not bad at all compared to the schlep that was Sabik. This planet doesn't have nearly as bad of a time to its jump point. And we've landed on Galatea, an arid planet located just 3 jumps from Terra. It served as a major training location for the Star League Defense Force. Oh wait, no. Sorry, Galatea is where we were. I'm real competent, aren't I, folks? Corridan 4 is where we currently are. Nice place. It's got a satellite called Muse. It's got equatorial temperature of 44 degrees Celsius. I think that's kind of high. 63% surface water. It had some native mammals. Capital city is Aloran. Nice for it. Let's see. I'll go ahead and give the description of the planet up front. When first settled, Corridan 4 promised to colonists an abundance of raw materials and fertile lands, but posed just one small problem. The entire planet's water table was tainted by heavy metals and infested with native bacteria that rendered every living thing on the planet, from plants to animals, toxic for human consumption. Faced with starvation and the failure of their colony, the first settlers initially relied on ice ships, such as those of the Ryan Cartel. Eventually, Gabriel Tall, a resident part-time chemical engineer, stumbled upon a means to purify over 95% of the toxic agents from small quantities of Corridani water, in a safe and economical fashion, using an innovative fusion filtration system. Tall's invention ultimately became the basis for Water Pure Industries, which would become the largest of the Lyran Commonwealth's 5 water purifier manufacturers. Though publicly traded, Water Pure remained mostly in Tal family hands throughout its history, expanding to add manufacturing sites on Freedom and Ride, and distribution sites on over a dozen worlds within the Federation of Sky. Federation of Sky is the name of what was what the Lyran Commonwealth was called before it became the Lyran Commonwealth. That happened like way old times. So this is talking about stuff that happened like back in the 2400s. You know, old history. In spite of the destruction of its main Coridan plant 6 times in history, don't worry about that jihad thing, that hasn't happened yet. Water Pure has managed to come back bigger and better every time. The value of clean, drinkable water obviously made Coridan 4 a prime target during the Succession Wars, that's what we're currently in, and for centuries its cities in the landscape of all 3 of its primary continents, Aluran and Sedurban in the northern hemisphere, Faerun in the southern, Faerun? You assholes, ripped it off. Bore the scars of repeated raids and planetary assaults. Well, we're contributing to that, aren't we? When the planet was ceded to the Republic of the Sphere, that's also in the future, don't worry about it. But today, their greatest exports after water purifiers are agricultural and ranching produce, which range from the native fruits and vegetables to the beef-like meat of the Korodani grazer, a dim-witted beast, roughly half again the size of a Terran buffalo. For this reason, many travelers expect a world of mainly rural plains. In fact, close to half the planetary population lives in big cities, mostly concentrated on Faerun and Saturban. The largest of these, Rio Grande, is home to the Water Pure Industries, much of the Tal family fortune, and the largest planetary spaceport. The planetary capital, New Austin, come on guys, is over 70 kilometers north of Rio Grande and boasts the planet's largest shipping concern, Korodani Forward, which uses its own starport. So, apparently the raid that we're currently engaged in, we're coming to steal all of the Lyran's water. At the very least, we may be raiding it to steal all of those fancy water purification techniques that they have so that we can make sure that they no longer have any, what do you want to call it, any stranglehold on it. I couldn't think of the right name. I'm going to go with that. We're here to steal their water. We're going to steal your goddamn water. Our personnel list hasn't changed a hell of a lot. We did pick up one new person of note. Uh, Two actually. Jessamina Gryko, a veteran mechanic, has joined our list, and that means Roderick isn't going to be on his own when he's fixing up all those vehicles, because I anticipate we're about to get a shitload more vehicles as salvage, so I bet he's looking forward to that. We already had Lena Gonzalez, so there's one more on here. Ah, another person who came in pretty much like as we were coming into the planet, Melusina, Cynthia Melasinos was actually, I guess we got her a fair bit earlier. I'm just a little behind on giving these people backstory. I've been too focused on, making mechs pretty and ready to fight. She's another veteran mech tech, then we can rely on her to do a lot of the stuff that we previously relied on, say, like Laura Do to do. It's just an extra person to do some work around here, and veterans are always useful for catching the issues that greens and regulars might miss. Otherwise, there's not much to talk about in the rest of this list. We've already pointed out the new mechs, the new changes, and our finances are, well, we've been making money and spending money. We actually got down pretty low money wise during one of these times because I was just on a kind of spending spree. But the forward from this mission helped bring that back up to par. So we are locked, we are loaded, we are ready to fight, and I am ready to get right into this briefing. But I think I'm going to leave that for next mission, next episode, and just make this a quick little fill in on where we went and why we went there. We went here to fuck with Lyrans because the contract is good, and also fuck Lyrans. I've got a fucking grudge against Lyrans right now, which is kind of hilarious. Most of my company, by random rolls, comes from the Lyran Commonwealth, but all of them are going to say, yeah, it's a fair cop. They're a bunch of rat bastards. You should go step on their houses. Anyway, next time, we'll probably go step on a bunch of people's houses. See you then.